Well, good afternoon, coasters, and interesting one here tonight. You'll recall the decision by Lou Sanson, the DOC Director General, to rescind the grazing licence held by John Cowan, which allowed grazing of his cattle in the Haast River Valley, which he'd done since the 70s. We started to do some research, followed by a series of interviews to enable us to share the story. The reason DOC gave to rescind the licence was that Cowans were unable to meet the fencing requirements, which was an unworkable condition put on by DOC upon renewal. We've had a look at other cattle grazing in national parks without fences and made some interesting observations. We looked at the practicalities of fencing off a West Coast river and found out very quickly why it's not done. We've had a look at the process that the renewal followed. Again, a very interesting trail. We've investigated the suggestion that DOC was aware that it had an agreement with the Nature Heritage Trust that there would be no more grazing concessions in the upper Haast River back in 2005. The application made by the Cowans was some years after the Nature Heritage Trust agreement with DOC, which was put in place when they purchased the Landsborough Valley Station. And at that time, DOC agreed there'd be no more grazing in the upper Haast River Valley. We've had a look at the $4,600 of fees that the Cowans paid pre-hearing to DOC. We've had a look at the account received for $43,000 for further costs of the hearing from DOC. It's an account not itemised, and that's right to this day, despite requests from the Cowans. On the face of it, it's possible that DOC knew there could only be one outcome of the Cowan lease renewal application. If it was to meet the agreement made with the Nature Heritage Trust in 2005. We've had a good look at another 32 Southwestland grazing licences and leases. I wonder which licence will be the next to fail to be renewed and the impact this will have on our Southwestland economy and communities. So we thought we'd look a bit further, and we looked at the deal that John Cowan did with DOC in 2008 over a grazing lease that Cowan had in the Haast River, and because it's relevant. Now, DOC wanted the Cowans to drop the lease so that they could add it to the Mount Aspiring National Park extension. And the DOC staff at the time pledged to provide a lease of a similar size, suitable for grazing, as part of the agreement for Cowan to drop his existing lease. Well, after a fair bit of going backwards and forwards, and the correspondence is all there, you won't believe it, but the land offered was discovered by the surveyors to be in the middle of the Haast River. Be only good for fly fishing, was the surveyor's comment. We looked at the financial implications for the Southwestland communities, where every job is treasured and where ideology-driven policy to remove cattle from the river flats on the coast is moving ahead unchecked. We have looked at what will happen now that DOC is responsible for the area in the upper Haast. They'll be responsible to look after the weeds, pest control, and maintain the road access past the cattle yards. History tells me it's going to be a problem there. We carried out over 2 hours of video interviews with a former statutory land manager for DOC. When you hear this, you find it very revealing. We looked at the instructions between LINZ and DOC during 2018, 2019, 2020, and we noted what appears to be a crossing of boundaries. We asked why 2 independent government departments under one minister, Minister Sage, during this period seem to have lost their independence. That's a story in itself. It all paints a picture of how DOC has handled the dealings with John Cowan and his family. The property right owned by the Cowans since 1970 that we're talking about is a grazing area in the Haast River. It's had cows on it for close to 150 years. And we're going to place this sequence of events leading to the rescinding of the grazing licence before you in an 18-part series of interviews on the Coasters Club. Then you can be the judge. Have a great night.